Call Government Order of the Day number 10.
Rongowhakaata Claim Settlement Bill, first reading.
Speaker.
Honourable Tariana Turia.
Mr Speaker, I move that the Rongowhakaata Claim Settlement Bill be now read a first time. Mr Speaker, at the appropriate time, I intend to move that the bill be considered by the Māori Affairs Committee. E ngā maunga o Puketapu rawa ko Manawaru, e ngā awa o Te Ara ai Turu rawa ko Waipaua, e ngā uri o Rongowhakaata, e ngā uri o Te Kōti, ko te kāhui maunga o Wanganui tēnei, e mihi atu nei ki a koutou. Ngāti maru, ngai tāwiri, ngāti kāpo'o, nau mai ki te whare pāremata. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I want to welcome the representatives of Rongowhakaata and ngā uri o Te Kōti Rikirangi who have joined us here tonight for this significant occasion. Tonight we acknowledge the historical grievances of Rongowhakaata. A particular feature of the settlements is a specific apology to ngā uri o Te Kōti Rikirangi and redress to address the ongoing effect of breaches of the Treaty of Waitangi by the Crown in its treatment of their tūpuna. The settlement of historical injustices inevitably bring into our living memory and thoughts those ancestors who gave life to the generations of today. The iwi of Rongowhakaata describe themselves as the descendants of Rongowhakaata and his wives, the sisters Tūrahiri, Uetūpuke and Moetai. Ruapani is another important tūpuna for many of Rongowhakaata. The first reading of this claim settlement bill is an important step towards completing a journey which has taken many years. It is a journey that began in 1987 with the lodging of Rongowhakaata's first claim with the Waitangi Tribunal. It stems from the Tūranganui Ākiwa and were represented in the negotiations with the Crown by their Claims Committee. Ngā uri o Te Kōti Rikirangi, also known as Ngā uri, are a whānau group who descend from Te Kōti Rikirangi, Ngā uri, negotiated the specific redress as part of Rongowhakaata's treaty settlement. Their area of interest is concentrated around Gisborne and its surrounding lands. It extends from Te Kōwhai on the southern side across to its most western point at Ruakituri, then northwards to Maungapere and Whare Kōpai and east towards Gisborne City. The Waitangi Tribunal held its Tūranganui Ākiwa District Inquiry in 2001 and 2002, which investigated the claims of the three Tūranga iwi, Rongowhakaata, Ngai Tā Manu Iri and Te Aitanga a Māaki and affiliates. While today we acknowledge the 25 years of dedicated commitment in pursuit of the claims first laid in 1987, the matters being dealt with do of course stretch out for decades beyond. The historical treaty claims and Ngā uri and Rongowhakaata stem from the Crown actions in Tūranganui Ākiwa during the 1860s, which were both severe and unjust. In 1865, Crown military forces attacked Wairinga Āhika. There was no apparent reason for doing so. This led to the detention without trial of many of the Rongowhakaata peoples on the Chatham Islands for several years and the effective confiscation of the Warenui, Te Hauki Tūranga and a large area of Rongowhakaata land at Patutahi. In the first 6 months of 1866, approximately 30 Rongowhakaata men who were considered to be Paimārire sympathisers were taken to the Chatham Islands. They were referred to as native political offenders. These men were never tried for any offence. Approximately 9 women and 8 children were amongst the 49 Tūranga women and 38 children who accompanied their men. The removal of over 200 Māori, including leaders, had a severe impact on their iwi, their hapu and their whānau who remained in Tūranga. This history has particular relevance for me. Next week I will be heading to Warekauri, a trip which in today's times takes approximately 3 hours by plane. It beggars belief to think about a similar journey being undertaken close to 150 years ago, and the questions are multiple. Why Ware Kauri? How long did the journey take? What were the conditions of travel? How did whānau separated for over 2 years without reason ever adjust to the grief, the resentment and the anger? And I want to share some of the history as it was recorded in the deed of settlement, and I quote, "The government required the detainees and their whānau to live in miserable conditions. The Chatham Islands could get much colder than what prisoners were used to, and they did not have adequate clothing. As many as 28 detainees died while on the Chathams, including some of the women and children who had accompanied them. It is likely that there were more deaths which went unrecorded. Those prisoners who survived were detained on the islands until Te Kōti Rikirangi led an escape in 1868. At that time, a bitter war developed, and at Ngā Tapa in January 1869, Crown forces summarily executed a large number of Rongowhakaata. This is to be one of the most tragic events in the history of Rongowhakaata, in fact, in the history of this country, and indeed a shameful past of the Crown. Between 1865 and 1872, more than 40% of Tūranga men died as a consequence of Crown military action, a fatal decimation of a people. The impact upon successive generations cannot be understated. Since this time, the Crown's acts and omissions have left Rongowhakaata culturally, economically and socially marginalised. We must never forget this history. It is our history, and it does not need to constrain our future. Today, this House attempts to understand the hostile context that Rongowhakaata experienced and to make every effort to move forward. This settlement includes an apology for the Crown's actions and omissions that breached the treaty and its principles, including those which contributed to the stigmatisation of Te Kōti Rikirangi and his descendants. The Crown recognised the mandate for the Rongowhakaata Claims Committee in 2005. The mandate of Ngā Uri negotiators was also recognised. 3 tūranga iwi entered into the terms of negotiation with the Crown as a collective group in 2007. In 2008, the collective signed an agreement in principle with the Crown. Following the collective separating in 2009, Rongowhakaata and Ngā Uri then entered into negotiations for a deed of settlement. The deed of settlement was initialled at Te Hau ki Tūranga in July 2011 and was subsequently ratified by the claimant community. In September 2011, the Crown and Rongowhakaata and Ngā Uri signed the deed of settlement. While the Crown recognises that settlement redress can never fully compensate these iwi for what has been lost through breaches of the treaty, this settlement is a gesture of goodwill and signifies the beginning of a new post-settlement relationship between Rongowhakaata, Ngā Uri and the Crown. Mr Speaker, I believe it is only right that the last word should go to Rongowhakaata articulated in the deed of settlement. It said, Rongowhakaata consider that since May 1840, the Crown has committed fundamental breaches of the spirit, intention and terms of the treaty, causing severe prejudice to Rongowhakaata, including unjustifiable loss of life in the protection of their lands, the confiscation of their lands and resources, resulting in the economic, social, cultural and political marginalisation and deprivation of Rongowhakaata that continues to be seen today. On the other hand, Rongowhakaata consider that despite the killing of their people by the Crown and the extreme prejudice and the intergenerational hardship caused by the confiscation of their lands and resources, Rongowhakaata have always upheld the spirit and the terms of the treaty in many ways. Mr Speaker, I consider that the bill should proceed without delay to the Māori Affairs Committee, and I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Parekura Horomia.